Hi, and welcome to the setup of my bullet journal for February 2021. I'm Kylie Dunn, and hopefully you watched January, so uh, if you have an idea of what bullet journaling is and everything else, if not, go back. I explained some of the basic principles around it. And please note, this is only the second year that I have been bullet journaling, so I'm by no means an expert in any of this. But I'm sharing because, hey, it's fun. And of course, for those of you who are back, yes, I decided to continue to share. So I decided I would do reflections pages at the end of each month. I'll try it for a few months, see how I feel. If I feel that they're useful to do, then I'll keep them. Otherwise, I'll get rid of them. That's basically how bullet journaling works in my world. Try it, see if it's going very well. If not, adapt, adjust, or just get rid of it. So because the theme for January was gardens, I do of course have flowers for my reflections page as well, which just makes sense. And I really enjoyed doing the flowers. I've been doing a lot of them external as well. It's been part of my sketching practice and everything else outside of my bullet journal. So, the gardens have been great. But at the same time, I am really looking forward to doing something else. So let's explain what the something else is for February. For February, I'm doing the night sky. So I've decided that, we'll have some moons and stars and planets and a couple of UFOs and some other random bits and pieces. But yeah, it'll be a nice change to have the night sky instead. And just quickly, what I decided that I would do, because last year I did a couple of courses in creating pop-up books, and I loved it, really enjoyed that dynamic mechanism of making pop-up books. So I decided I'd chuck a pop-up mechanism into here as well because, hey, night skies have shooting stars. So why not make a really simple little mechanism that actually gives me a shooting star? That's what you'll see me create in a minute. So I went through and sort of, standard setup for my February, having my calendar on one side. Normally, I would actually put the focus area next to my calendar, but because I needed to use the central part in order to create a pop-up, then they've gone on either side of the month. I did actually make the pop-up mechanism a little bit too long, so I had to shorten it and then go through and expand bits and pieces. And possibly I should have done that background as watercolor, but I'll explain that in a few minutes. So the mechanism is really quite simple. It's just a simple little mechanism that has that little V-fold in it. And that V-fold creates a gully that you can put an arm onto. And then what happens is when it goes flat, the arm folds down, and when you fold it out, the arm comes up, which means I can put a shooting star on it. It's a nice, simple little mechanism. Yes, it's got to be quite precise, and I nearly made the tail a little bit too long of the shooting star because I did have to shorten that bottom mechanism, but it all works. So I'm really happy with how it came out. Then of course we have just a couple of other things to add in to make it look a little bit more like a night sky. So we have a moon and we have some clouds. And again, it's just part of that, the preciseness of sort of doing pop-up is I needed to make sure that I really didn't glue them incorrectly because then I would have glued the mechanism down and it would no longer be able to work. So, it's a little bit of fun. And like I said, I really enjoyed doing the courses. So I might add a few more in where I feel that, they might be legitimate to do so. You might see a few more pop-ups in here as well. So adding a few stars into the night sky, and of course under the tail of that UFO, of the shooting star, there's a tiny little UFO as well, because why not? So last month I only showed you 3 days, and this month I'm going to draw up the entire sort of month. So let's go. As you'll see, this is the layout that I generally like to do. I like to have 4 days to a page. I like to have them as the boxes. I feel that this gives me the most usable space, but still allows me to have a notes area so that I can go through and capture some bits and pieces for each week as well. Which then allows me to feed into the reflection or allows me to capture bits and pieces that I need to consider for next week or just, other little things as well. So I find that it's quite a good way to do the layout. You'll see the funky tool that I'm using here as well. I'm really just using the ruler, but it's got all sorts of curves and everything, so hopefully I'll be able to use it for more in future. That comes from Flywheel in New Norfolk in Tassie, so if you're down here in Tassie, go to Flywheel. You really need to go to Flywheel, it's awesome. And you'll see that with these layouts, as I go through and do them, I keep them pretty simple. Because the idea is these pages, for me, need to be really functional, which means I need to not steal too much space in creating the visual elements in order to give myself the most amount of space to capture all the things that I need to do and different bits and pieces about what happened, and, you know, because it is a little bit of that reflective journaling as well as being my diary of what's going on and what I've done and everything else. So I like to give it as much space as I can. Now, let's talk a little bit about watercolours in the layout. So for this layout, you might be able to see, you'll definitely see it in a minute because I'll put pen around it. Through the centre, I've got a moon and stars. So I've got a swish of moon and stars. And the idea was, when I was drawing it up, I was thinking I could probably like watercolour in behind it and sort of create that effect. But I hadn't played with the watercolours in the journal. And it's really important because, you know, the Archer and Olive journals are great. Like, the paper's really thick and you can see that you'd be able to watercolour more effectively, and the pages wouldn't like bubble too much, like, you know, getting all that water on them. But because the Tombow markers had dried really quickly, I was a bit concerned about how the watercolours would work, especially given that I'm not brilliant at watercolours. This isn't something that I've spent a lot of time doing in my world. And so I decided, look, I'll give it a miss and just basically pencil it in. And I'm happy with how the penciling came out. But you'll see I did decide, because this process ended up going over 2 days, I did decide to play with the watercolours in the back so I can add them in. You'll see that in a few pages' time. So up to the 3rd week, and you might notice I keep flicking back and forth whenever I have to write the week number because when I did my first bullet journal, I lost a week. Yeah, I just skipped a week entirely because I thought I knew what the number was as I was going through, and obviously I just skipped it and didn't even realise for the longest time. So it is something that I do go back and check. I have also gotten dates wrong at different points in time. So, you know, even though I'm doing it all in one go, your brain sort of gets a bit focused on the creativity, and I need to go back and check the facts as I'm doing it. So you might notice me flick back and forth a little bit. So ostensibly the layout stays the same and it stays quite minimalistic, as I mentioned, but I do like to change the lettering. I do like to play around with the lettering quite a bit as I do this. Now, for any of you who are a little bit observant and remember the January video, you might notice that at this point in time, there's something I haven't done that I should have done, and that is my tracker pages, or my tracker, my health tracker and my mood tracker. Normally, I do them directly after the month double layout, and when I was penciling this up, I forgot them because that's what happens. And I wasn't going to go back through and erase everything and go back and do it, because it doesn't matter. It doesn't matter what order I put these in. It's my bullet journal. It's how I lay it out. As long as it's in there, it doesn't matter how it's going to look and feel. So, you know, I just got to let it go. And this actually works really well for me in my recovering perfectionist brain, that I am better able to just let things go, because nothing in here is perfect. This is me playing around. And it's a little bit scarier for me to play around and then put it in a video and share it with people. But at the same time, you know, I know that you'll probably all be quite forgiving of the fact that maybe I didn't get this perfect and maybe it could be better. But who cares? It's my journal. So it doesn't need to be perfect. And that's a really sort of powerful thing for me as well, as part of, you know, like I said, the recovering perfectionist side of things. So the reflections page, I am going to go back to just a single page for each month and see how that goes. Really, January only got a double page because, you know, it's sort of, I put it in as an end thing. and you can't really have a blank page, so it ended up with a double. So hey, that's how it worked. But this is normally how I'll probably end up doing it. And then of course adding a quote in. As I said, I liked doing the quote in January, so putting another one in February. I looked up quotes for the night or quotes for stars and those bits and pieces, and I came up with this. It's from a poem by Sarah Williams. So I love the stars too fondly to be fearful of the night. And I think the poem's called The Astronomer. Don't quote me on it, but I'm pretty certain that's what it's called. So yeah, it's just a nice little thing, and it sort of spoke to me a little bit. So I'm like, oh, that's pretty cute. I'll include that one in there as well. Now, when I did this quote, I practiced it a little bit in Procreate to see how I might lay it out and what I might do with it. And this was the layout I came up with. When I was doing that, because Procreate, of course, I can just make it a dark background. And I liked having a dark background for it, but I'm not going to colour in an entire page. So this is why I'd gone to the back of the book and played with some watercolours and basically went, look, can I do this? Yep, look, watercolour's pretty simple. We'll just live with it. So I added some watercolours in just to give it a little bit more, I guess, texture to the background. Let's say that. That's probably the easiest way to explain it. And I'm pretty happy with most of it. Yeah, you noticed that most of it too, huh? The bit I'm not happy with is I need to improve my mixing of colours. And I need to not rush it. That's the other part of this. I need to just not be rushing things. Because this cloud that I'm painting now, the cloud that's in front of the moon, I'm really not happy with the colour that I got for it. And you'll see, because I really rapidly adjusted that colour for the other clouds and then tried to sort of go back and fix it. But it's come out too muddy, and I'm really not happy with that sort of particular element on there. I mean, I'm fine with the whole thing overall. I think it came out okay, but that particular cloud, I could do better. So it's good. It's part of the learning process. And what I basically now know is that I need to go back and spend a bit of time improving my skills in watercolour, which was sort of a little bit something that I realised when I did the project last year with all the Skillshare courses and everything as well. So, you know, it's not news to me, but it really sort of gave me a bit of a nudge that I probably need to go back and look at that and improve my skills there. So that's been put into my professional development page that I want to do a little bit more work around improving my watercolours, just so that I'm a little bit happier with how they come out here. So that's the quote element. And then, of course, we now have to put in our trackers because I forgot to do them. So my health tracker, this worked really well for me in January to go through and capture, you know, how things are basically going. And health-wise, I mean, January is pretty good. You know, things weren't overly horrendous in any way, shape or form, which was good. It's also really good for my mood, but we'll talk about that in a second. But this I found really productive because it did point out to me how many days my hips were really problematic, and means I do need to go back to my physio and have a discussion about that because, yeah, it's sort of not really getting better. So that's there. And then my mood tracker, of course, and because we are talking about the night sky, the elements in my mood tracker are, of course, all stars and planets and satellites, spaceships, a sun, a UFO, all those bits and pieces. And I think it's one of the reasons I enjoy the mood tracker. Like, I like doing the mood tracker, don't get me wrong. It's a very valuable thing. And, you know, it shows me that in January my mood was pretty good overall. So it is a sort of nice thing to have in here. But at the same time, I do enjoy the little bit of creativity of trying to come up with different elements and design components for my theme that goes into here. So of course they're all hanging down like they're in the sky because that's cute. So this is my bullet journal for February. So night sky themed with my pop-up, which I need to add a few more stars because I forgot to add any stars onto the arm and that makes it look a little bit weird. But yeah, thank you very much for your time. And if you are watching this on YouTube, please feel free to like it if you did like it or share with other people. Thanks a lot.